Let's get into it. The Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy is expected back in his country after spending just a few hours in the United States, where he made a whirlwind visit on Wednesday to the White House and to Congress. Now, at Congress, he addressed a joint meeting aiming to persuade Republican lawmakers to continue funding his country's defense against Russia. President Zelenskyy joined a long list of world leaders to address the joint Senate and House, a tradition that began in 1874 with a visit by Hawaiian King Kalakua and included almost legendary wartime visits by British Prime Minister Winston Churchill, as well as kings, queens, and one pope. It also marked one of the last times Nancy Pelosi presided over the chamber as Speaker of the House before Republicans take a majority on January 3rd. She returns to the rank and file of her caucus. The Ukrainian president had fire in his bones as he told the chamber, Ukraine is alive and kicking.
Turn around.
Yes.
There we go.
So, yes, the Ukrainian president did speak to Congress, one of the very few and very lucky world leaders to make it to address the joint house. That's the Senate and the House of Representatives. It was a pretty secret visit to the United States. How he got there, still the details still being worked out. But President Zelenskyy also told Congress tens of billions of dollars of aid it had approved had helped in fighting the Russians in Ukraine.
Thank you for both financial packages you have already provided us with and the ones you may be willing to decide on. Your money is not charity. It's an investment in the global security and democracy that we handle in the most responsible way. I'm glad to stress that President Biden supported our peace initiative today. Each of you, ladies and gentlemen, can assist in the implementation to ensure that America's leadership remains solid, bicameral, and bipartisan. Thank you. It's a great honor for me to be at the U.S. Congress and speak to you and all Americans. Against all odds and doom and gloom scenarios, Ukraine didn't fall. Ukraine is alive and kicking. We defeated Russia in the battle for minds of the world. We have no fear, nor should anyone in the world have it. Ukraine's gained this victory, and it gives us courage, which inspires the entire world.
Well, U.S. President Joe Biden did welcome the Ukrainian president to the White House on Wednesday evening. And after they both had a talk in private, the president of the United States announced during a press conference the U.S. will provide $1.85 billion in additional military assistance for Ukraine, including a transfer of the Patriots air defense system. Now, according to President Biden, the Patriot system is a defensive system and not escalatory. It is, however, considered to be one of the most advanced U.S. air defense systems and offers protection against aircraft, cruise and ballistic missiles. It typically includes launchers along with radar and other support vehicles. Since Russia's invasion of Ukraine on February 24 this year, the United States has committed about $21.2 billion in military assistance to Kyiv. President Biden also told the Ukrainian president he is not at all worried about holding together an international coalition supporting Ukraine. He's also never seen the NATO alliance nor the European Union more united.
His expectations I see no sign of there being any change. We all know what's at stake here. Our European partners all the more so. They fully understand it. So I don't see any reason to believe there'll be any lessening of support. And as we reach out to our NATO allies, our Secretary of Defense and our Secretary of State, we get continued support, not only there, but also from around the world, from Japan and many other countries as well. So I feel very good about the solidarity of support for Ukraine.
Well, back in Russia, the media says former Russian Deputy Prime Minister and pro-Moscow officials were injured in Ukraine, were injured when Ukrainian forces shelled the eastern city of Donetsk on Wednesday. Donetsk, controlled by pro-Moscow troops, is in the Nostro Donbass region, the epicenter of recent bitter fighting between Russia and Ukraine. One of the injured men was Dmitry Rogozin, a former deputy prime minister for Russia, who's giving military advice to two occupied regions of Ukraine, that Moscow claims as its own, and an aide to the Donetsk People's Republic. Both men were injured when the Sheshbesh Hotel and restaurant on the outskirts of Donetsk came under fire from high-precision weapons, according to the aides. Speaking to the media, a Russian parliamentarian who was also at the hotel suggested the attackers had acted on a tip. Rogozin expressed the same view in his Telegram channel. Now, as we said on Wednesday, the Kremlin also keeping a close eye on President Volodymyr Zelensky's visit to the United States. They've responded following the promise of the U.S. Patriot missile system to Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy. The Kremlin criticized the U.S. supplies, saying they would not contribute to its settling the conflict between Moscow and Kyiv and would not prevent Russia from achieving its goals. In a call with reporters, Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov said there'd been no signs of readiness for peace talks during Zelenskyy's visit to the United States, and that this was evidence that the United States was fighting a proxy war with Russia to the last Ukrainian. Well, we'll have more on this later. In the meantime, more on the Russian invasion of Ukraine as we move on to other aspects of the war. A Russian cruise missile screeched towards the target this month. Ukrainian pilots gave a chase in an old Soviet MiG-29 jet and locked onto two of them, but could not take aim or a shot as they were nearing a large town because it was too risky. It passed the targets onto the Ukrainian ground-based air defenses, which shot them down as they had done hundreds of missiles since October, blunting the impact of a Russian air campaign that aims to destroy the power grid. As such, skirmishes are common in the skies over Ukraine, and their outcome will have a direct bearing on the lives of millions of people who will be without central heating, power or running water during the freezing winter if defenses fail. Air battle will also dictate how badly the economy will suffer. It is already set to contract at least a third this year, as shops and heavy industry cannot keep the lights on. Russia, which says the grid is a legitimate military target, has launched 9 large-scale air attacks, firing more than 70 missiles at a time since October 10, knocking out power, running water, mobile signal, and, of course, heating. And once again, Russia's Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu has been seen or sighted in the front lines of this war against Ukraine. He had been visiting army units fighting in Ukraine. According to the Defense Ministry, Shoigu visited Russian units deployed to the area of the special military operation, using Moscow's term for the conflict in Ukraine. It did, however, not specify where the visit took place. Belarusian President Alexander Lukashenko says recent military maneuvers are not aimed at Ukraine, dismissing conspiracy theories about deployments of Belarusian armed forces at the border. Speaking at a conference of military leaders marking the end of snap military inspections held this month, President Alexander Lukashenko said he could not rule out aggression against Belarus on the part of unspecified neighbors. He said, if you want peace, prepare for war. Lukashenko says military moves are limited to Belarusian territory and do not threaten anyone else. Belarus has in recent weeks announced a flurry of military activity, including readiness checks and a fresh deployment of Russian troops to the country. The maneuvers prompting suggestions from Ukrainian officials that Russia may be planning a fresh attack on Ukraine via Belarusian territory, as it did unsuccessfully in the early days of its so-called special military operation in Ukraine. And on Monday, President Alexander Lukashenko hosted President Vladimir Putin of Russia in Minsk, where foreign visit for the Kremlin chief. A visit prompted fears Putin was seeking to cajole Belarus into joining the military campaign in Ukraine, something Lukashenko has so far declined to do. Russia says it will fulfill the task it set out in its special military operation to ensure the security of all its territories and continues to strengthen its armed forces. That's according to President Vladimir Putin. Speaking at an expanded meeting of the Russian Defense Ministry Board, President Putin said the Sarmat intercontinental ballistic missile will soon be deployed. He says NATO countries are actively using all their military capabilities to deal with Russia, and it's necessary for Russian forces to expand its arsenal of modern striking weapons, noting that the level of modern armaments in Russia's strategic nuclear forces has exceeded 91%. Putin ordered the military to maintain and improve the combat readiness of the nuclear triad, which is a guarantee for the sovereignty of Russia's federation. While delivering a report at the meeting, Russian Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu proposed to increase the number of Russian armed forces to 1.5 million servicemen. And he says a total of 27 countries have provided weapons to Ukraine at a cumulative cost of $97 billion. Welcome back. And all the buzz has been about the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky's visit to the United States. He got a chance to address Congress, met with President Joe Biden at the White House, welcomed by Joe Biden himself and the First Lady of the United States. He also met with Nancy Pelosi, probably one of her last outings before she finally hands over in January as the Republicans take over the House of Representatives. The Democrats, of course, already holding on to leadership in the Congress already. And then he addressed Congress much later, telling them Ukraine is alive and kicking, and also appealing to Republicans about those military aids that are coming to Ukraine. President Joe Biden announced a $1.8 billion additional aid for Ukraine after having already sent more than $20 billion in military aid to the country. There's a lot going on in Ukraine at the moment, and President Zelenskyy already should be on his way back from the United States.
Turn around.
Yes.
There we go.
His expectations at every single turn. I'm not at all worried about holding the alliance together, NATO and the European Union, as well as other nations. It already failed because he now knows that there's no way he's ever going to occupy all of it. And, I see no sign of there being any change. We all know what's at stake here. Our European partners, all the more so. They fully understand it. To the Ukrainian people, I say to them all, you have demonstrated. So I don't see any reason to believe there'll be any lessening of support. And as we reach out to our NATO allies, our Secretary of Defense and our Secretary of State, we get continued support, not only there, but also from around the world, from Japan and many other countries as well. So I feel very good about the solidarity of support for Ukraine.
Thank you very much. You asked me what is the message to American people. Для нас, для всех. Thank you for both financial packages you have already provided us with and the ones you may be willing to decide on. Your money is not charity. It's an investment in the global security and democracy that we handle in the most responsible way. I'm glad to stress that President Biden supported our peace initiative today. Each of you, ladies and gentlemen, can assist in the implementation to ensure that America's leadership remains solid, bicameral, and bipartisan. Thank you. It's a great honor for me to be at the U.S. Congress and speak to you and all Americans. Against all odds and doom and gloom scenarios, Ukraine didn't fall. Ukraine is alive and kicking. We defeated Russia in the battle for minds of the world. We have no fear, nor should anyone in the world have it. Ukraine's gained this victory, and it gives us courage, which inspires the entire world.
Let's revisit our lead story, which is the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy in the United States. He is supposedly on his way back to Ukraine after a whirlwind visit through the U.S., starting off at the White House with U.S. President Joe Biden being welcomed to the White House alongside his wife, Jill Biden, and then addressing Congress, one of the very few times other world leaders have done so in the United States, a tradition that started in 1874. Well, joining me now is Professor Femi Otunbanjo, a political and international affairs commentator. He joins me from Lagos. Professor Otunbanjo, thank you. Just behind the scenes, we've been trying to reach you, and we want to appreciate your patience staying with us until this time. Everyone's been talking about, this visit by Volodymyr Zelenskyy to the United States. They've hailed it as a diplomatic coup for Ukraine and for the Ukrainian president himself. It was a big risk, though, wasn't it, security-wise? Do you think it was worth it?
Well, I think from the point of view of Ukraine, it is worth it because that's part of their strategy of strengthening the relationship with the United States, particularly the so-called right-wing elements in Ukraine who are behind Zelenskyy. They see the U.S. as their primary ally, and this is a price to pay. This is a price to pay to strengthen that friendship. So, in a sense, it's a good visit for Ukraine, but whether it's good overall, from a strategic point of view, it's a different matter. Because it seems to me that Ukraine is being thrown out to dry. You must look at who is benefiting from the war. Who's benefiting from this war? And my fear is that the U.S. is benefiting and Ukraine is getting nothing. Ukraine is like a rat that is being fattened up to confront a dog or a cat, not to talk of a lion. You are fattening up a rat to confront a lion. it will not end well. We can predict how it will end. Russia is a major power, it's a superpower, it's a nuclear power. It will not accept defeat from Ukraine. It will not be defeated, I can say that. Just like the US will not accept defeat. So, pumping up Ukraine and getting Ukraine destroyed. One American scholar called it leading Ukraine on a primrose road. On the primrose lane, that is a lane that looks attractive and then ends in destruction. It is not good, but the US is benefiting. The US is, from the point of view of its foreign policy aspiration, it's always wanted to diminish every other country in the world. Those of us who are fairly familiar with foreign policy theories will know the world doctrine during the George Bush Sr. That doctrine was that no country, after the collapse of the Soviet Union, that no country should be allowed to rise to challenge US hegemony. And that is the policy that is operating. They denied it. They rebuffed, the policy at that time. That was just the theoretical idea of a radical academic. But that is what is operating. No country should rise sufficiently to challenge America's supremacy in the world. And that's why under Trump, the emphasis was on China. Now it's Russia. Trump himself was a victim of trying to build up Russia by friendship with Putin. And then he went after China in order to diminish China. This is part of a global real politics. And Ukraine, unfortunately, is at the receiving end. It's been destroyed in order to sustain America's interest at the foreign politics level, at the domestic politics level. But Biden, his popularity rate is one of the lowest for several decades. And war is always a booster. Patriotism, they say, is the last refuge of a scoundrel. War is used by political leaders to rouse emotions, to get support of their people. Ukraine is one instrument in Biden's attempt to show that he's a successful president, and so he gains from it. And not to talk of the economic gains. The military-industrial complex is not a myth. It's a reality in American politics. And they are the ones supplying all the weapons. Ukraine is giving almost 80 billion support in America. Where is the money going? Who's getting the money? The money doesn't go to Ukraine. The money goes to the military-industrial complex. So when they bring Zelenskyy to the US to show, it's like they're showing people, this is where your money is going. This is the man that's going to help us to deal with Russia and so on. There's no gain to Zelenskyy. It is symbolic. It is totally wasteful symbolism. And I think that what we need in the world today is to avoid this danger of this proxy war, the danger of this proxy war, of supplying Ukraine with Patriot missiles, of giving them 1.8 billion additional support. We need to end that before these things gradually slice us into a nuclear war. Because Russia is shouting every day that America is increasing its presence in the war, and also the NATO countries by their support, and that it might gradually regard them as the enemy. And that is a point of danger. We must not dismiss it as if it's not realistic. So what we want now at this point in the war is to try to work towards a peaceful resolution. Ukraine will not win. And Russia will continue to isolate itself from the rest of the world by this destructive and the barbaric destruction of infrastructure in Ukraine. But the point is that as a superpower, its ego is so mighty. And America wants to show that Russia is not as strong as it claims to be. Russia wants to show that it's stronger than America is. So we are fighting this. The United States fighting as a proxy war to Ukraine, and the Soviet Union. You ask yourself, what is the gain? What would the United States gain in this war beyond the fact that it is looking to bring Russia down and to remain the only superpower?
So, Professor Tibajo, you have rightly apportioned blame, to both sides, to the U.S., which it says is fighting a proxy war with Russia through Ukraine, and you've also apportioned, blame to the Russian side, of course, which has been bombarding Ukrainian targets and conducting this all-out destruction of Ukraine. But here's the thing: the Russian side remains, its rhetoric remains largely the same. The fact that President Putin has strengthened his cooperation with the Belarusians. He is also working towards unveiling a new set of high-tech military equipment. Quite unimpressed, with whatever support the U.S. is giving to Ukraine at the moment. You're talking about, both countries coming to the negotiating table, but as far as the Russians are concerned, there is no room for that because Ukraine, according to them, really does not want to get to the negotiating table. This is a fight to the finish, a fight to win for the United States and for Russia. So where do we go from here?
What does it mean a fight to finish? Russia will not accept loss. Don't forget that Russia is a nuclear power. It has that ultimate result to protect its honor by resorting to a destructive weapon that will inevitably destroy the whole world. Well, we don't want to push it to that, to that point where nobody is giving way. The U.S. is comfortable. It has no side effects of the war, except that the war has brought inflation and shortages because of the embargoes and blockades and so on. But basically, there's no physical destruction. The war is so far away from the United States that it can afford to continue to give this support without consequences. But Ukraine that is receiving the support is being destroyed every day. And when the man comes dressed like some victim of war, somebody who's ready to sacrifice for war, the point is, will the United States accept Cuba or Mexico to be part of an alliance against the United States? We have to look at it. Sovereignty, fine, but how much respect are the Western powers given to sovereignty? So we have to look at what are the basic sources. The negotiation is the ultimate. Let Ukraine stay out of NATO and let Russia stay out of the frontiers of Ukraine. Russia is claiming part of Ukraine, the Donbas region as part of Russia. That has to be negotiated. You can't balkanize Ukraine. When Ukraine, you cannot go to NATO. Because the moment you become a member of NATO, it means that NATO is at the doorstep of Ukraine, of Russia. It means that Russia becomes a target of NATO all the time. And it becomes a victim. It becomes vulnerable. So we have to look at those parameters and try to work out. There's no war that will not end. The only war that will not end is a nuclear war. A nuclear war, as Brezhnev and Reagan said in those days, it cannot be won and it should not be fought. So what we are praying is that this little war that appears to be a small war does not escalate into a major conflagration that will lead to the exchange of nuclear weapons. The smallest exchange of nuclear weapons will simply bring all of us down because of the very, very dangerous after effects.
Professor Tubanjo, I know we definitely have to bring you back on the show. Very limited time we have for you to express your thoughts and your opinions and analysis on the issue, but we appreciate the time spent with us at this time. Thank you for joining us on the program.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.